Buenas and Hafide. The background behind me was taken at Letecton, also known as Ritidian, one of the most beautiful places on Guam that is, of course, inaccessible to most people on the island, and was taken in the 60s from the original families. Guahosi Baltazar Aguon. I'm an alumnus of the University of Guam with a BA in Communications with emphasis on mass media and an MFA in Film from the American Film Institute's Center for Advanced Film and Television Studies. Along with Dr. Michael Bivacqua and Christine Borja-Sumbi, I was a co-producer in the Francis Negron Montaner documentary War for Guam, which was broadcast on 670 air dates on 165 PBS stations across the United States in 2015. It premiered locally at the University of Guam and also screened at the Senator Antonio M. Palomo Guam Museum Educational Facility. It also aired on PBS Guam. Very briefly about the film, War for Guam is a documentary film about World War II and its enduring legacy on Guam, a US territory since 1898. It tells the extraordinary story of how the Chamorros survived a brutal Japanese occupation while remaining loyal to the US. The story is told from various points of view of war survivors and their descendants and local Pacific scholars. It highlights two key figures, Polijesus Baza Dueñas and radio man George Tweed. War for Guam sheds light on unresolved issues arising from World War II between the United States and the Chamorro people, such as confiscated land, the drive for US citizenship, and the vigilance of a new generation who rise up to voice their opposition to unchecked militarism. If you want to know more about the film, you can visit warforguam.com. Since we're talking about connecting to our Manaina and the war generation, I thought a lot before coming on, and as a young boy, I was always curious and at many times angry why we locals couldn't go beyond the fences surrounding the military bases. This curiosity eventually led to a passion and desire to know what it was like for the Chamorros who lived through World War II. Unfortunately, as the previous speakers had stated, there wasn't much written or produced at the time from a Chamorro-centric point of view, and the war survivors in my family were reluctant at the time to talk about their experiences. After high school, I remember visiting my grandfather, Tuncutlas Pangilinan Budadzu, who was in his early 80s then, and I asked him what it was like during the war. His eyes glazed over, and he shook his head, and all he said was, "It was very bad, very bad." And I knew not to press further. I could see that it was still too painful for him to talk about the war. And I could see that in his eyes, the depths of his sorrow. I never heard from him that he was a part of the group who, in defiance of Japanese orders, listened to secret radio transmissions of news about the progress of the war, or that he worked very hard to take care of his family. We never did talk about his wartime experiences before he passed in 1986. Excuse me. I was 35 the first time I heard my father tell his story about the war. I sat with him to draft his testimony for the War Claims Review Commission in 2003. And as he relayed his experiences, I was secretly pleased that I would finally get to hear his experience of the war. I listened to what he went through, and my heart began to fill with sadness. At one point, he told me that he and his work group were forced to watch the execution of a very good friend who was shot and then repeatedly bayoneted. The Japanese soldier in charge told the group that if they looked away or cried, they would be the next to die. At this point in the story, my tears fell. My dad was only 16 at this time, and I could not fathom what he had to endure. So this was how I connected with his experience. I tried to imagine myself at his age going through the horrors of war, of watching a good friend murdered before your eyes, of having family beaten, land confiscated, and people you respected and admired executed. Excuse me. This totally humbled me. It instilled in me a deep appreciation and love for him. So this was how I connected on a personal level to my father's wartime experience. And finally, during the course of my archival research for War for Guam, as I located and reviewed many pictures and moving images of our people, I began to connect on a wider, more universal level to the experiences of our war generation, our Mañana. For my active role in documenting this generation and the dark period they lived through, I learned in the most profound way that no obstacle is insurmountable, that fortitude of mind and spirit will always be there when needed, that in the face of seemingly unbeatable adversity, be courageous and draw strength in knowing that all our Mañana who came before stand with us. Perhaps the greatest lesson I learned, the deepest connection I gained, was that despite forced labors, the beatings, the rapes, the torture, the executions and witnessing of executions, the forced march, and the internment in refugee camps, despite being humiliated and mocked, despite being stripped of their livelihoods and well-being, our Mañana brought forth with them into a new era the capacity to love and be loved, to laugh, to find and appreciate beauty, to truly forgive, and to have faith that there is light even in the darkest of times. I am thankful that War for Guam adds to the growing body of knowledge documenting our greatest generation's wartime experience, and that it will be around for generations to come. Thank you, Guampedia and the University of Guam's Liberal College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences for having me here today. Jesus Maasi.
Jesus Maasi Tsetlu, and to feel your piniti, the piniti of our Mañana that we carry in our hearts. And that's even now, and we, I think just recently they've been, through law, have been recognized as Guam's greatest generation. And like Malia said, it's so important that we continue to remember them, to honor them, and to carry on their stories with all that they endured, and especially Baltazar, you know, trying to imagine watching like my Tetlu being beaten, you know, it's just, and it's the ability to forgive. And that is so rooted in their faith in God and the spirit of Anaphamalik, because the war and what it left behind was terrible. But they gathered their things, what little they could, and said, Tatso'okwi motna. Tatso'okwi hafanisita, para familia, para todos. It's not wait around, it's let's go back, let's go to and work together. And that's something that we need to take away and use with us as a guide, as a light, as we chart through this uncertain times, unprecedented times. Nothing like what our Mañanas had to deal with. Because if you think about the bombardment of Guam and what it looked like after the war, look at what we have, the lushness of our environment, the waters have been healing themselves through this COVID shutdown, Bula, Guinahan, Dizaguahan, and the Marianas. And so we have so much to be grateful for. And another person, another Tetlu, who is actually technically by blood my nephew, Subinuhu, James Perez Viernes. His mother and I are first cousins, Zita Pengalin and Perez from Santa Rita. She's the daughter of Maria Sablan Pangilinan, Familian Kotla, he's a Sumay, and his maternal grandfather is Antonio Borja Perez, Familian Gzinza Zantitang of Hagatna. His father is Andres Santos Viernes from Santa Rita, and he's the son of Guadalupe Sablan Santos, Familian Miguet from Sumay. And Andres Agustin Viernes, his paternal grandfather, was born in the Philippines and raised in Honolulu. And that is where James is joining us from, although his favorite place on Guam, and I'm going to have him talk about his background. Where exactly are you at, James?